Hi Reader Pops, welcome to every book that I read this summer. I didn't do a monthly wrap up for all of summer, so now we're gonna combine it. I have 20 books to talk about total. I found new favorite authors in this list. I found a lot of 5 stars actually, and I feel like I also learned a little bit more about my reading taste. For example, the first book that I read in June was Just Last Night by Vari McFarlane. I think I have the receipt in here. That would be crazy. I do. Holy crap, this is like a relic. This is crazy. Maybe it says the date. August 13th, 2021. That's crazy. That's when I bought this book. It was one of the first book hauls I ever did. Why did I buy this book? I have no idea what drew me to this book, but I didn't read it until 2024 and it was 5 stars for me. And I'm so glad that I did wait all of that time, because if this was one of the first books I'd ever read, I don't think I would have really enjoyed it. Most of her novels are mostly a literary fiction book because they're very heavily based on the character arc and interpersonal relationships, but there's always a romance and there's always very juicy secrets coming out, hilarious events happening, but they all feel very realistic. Sometimes she'll explore like a toxic relationship, but in this one in particular, it's following a close friend group. The main person we're following, Eve, has a lifelong crush on one of the guys in the friend group, and then something very tragic and sudden happens and it kind of upends everything, and with that tragic thing happening, a huge secret comes out as well. So this book is very heavily about grief. I think it's the saddest one that I've read by her by far, but there's also a super unexpected romance that had me giggling out. I mean, literally all of her books have me giggling out loud. I look stupid when I read her books because they're so good that I physically can't contain emotions on my face. Like I have to express them, which is not like me typically. So this book was so amazing. I had like 67 highlighted quotes because I read this on my Kindle. It's a 5-star book. It's one of my new favorite authors. I feel like I didn't pick up her books for so long because the descriptions on the back are so vague and it just doesn't sound like it would be a very interesting story. It sounds like it would kind of meander and be slow, but her books are not slow at all. They're very juicy. In my opinion, they're fast-paced because I can't put them down when I'm reading them. And the quotes are just reading thoughts that you've had that have never been described before, which is why I love reading so much, when it just feels like your life has been written down. It is the most unparalleled experience out there. So 5 stars. And then I read 7 Summer Weekends by Jane L. Rosen. I love the cover of this book so much. Whenever summer comes around, I always crave like a good beach house book. And in this one, she inherits a beach house from her aunt who she was never close with. So she goes to this island. It's called Fire Island. I think that's made up. So she gets fired from her job in Manhattan and she inherits this beach house. So she moves to Fire Island and is trying to figure out why this aunt gave her the beach house and if she should sell it, which the neighbors don't want her to do because it's a very tight-knit, close community, or if she should live there, or what. She just doesn't know what she's doing with her life. I feel like this book in certain aspects almost read as a parable because she learns about her aunt through the visitors who come to the house. Someone will knock on the door and share a memory that they shared with her aunt. And I thought that that part was really cool. And it was mostly about that for the first 50% of the book, which I think I enjoyed more because the second half became more about a enemies to lovers romance with this author who lives on the island. And they have a ton of like funny they're not that funny, they're just unfortunate miscommunications. But once it became about that, at the halfway mark, I stopped caring about it. So I think the vibes of the book were really good for summer. I stopped feeling as invested once it was about the romance. So I gave it 3 stars. And then I read Set on You by Amy Lee, which is also a book that I've had on my shelf for so long. I think I bought this in 2021 as well. This one is about a curvy fitness influencer, Crystal Chen, and firefighter Scott Ritchie. This is a romantic comedy, by definition, like an actual romantic comedy. And you see a lot of scenes of them at the gym. She's trying to get her content because that's what she does for a living. And there's this really annoying dude who always steals her bars, gets in the way of her videos, and so she coins him as her like gym arch nemesis, which is silly rom-com behavior, you know? But then she runs into him at her grandparents' engagement party. So they have some family ties going on. So they start to get to know each other. And I actually thought the romance aspects of this book were very realistic and very cute. It's very slice of life feeling, like she just goes to the gym, she goes to her apartment, she hangs out with her friends. Your daily calendar, that's what this book is kind of like. And I thought the firefighter was actually a very sweet character. I liked how he treated her a lot. But I feel like anytime there's influencers in books, it's so easy for them to become caricatures, and this one definitely felt like that. And towards the end of the book, whenever there was a conflict, that felt pretty realistic, but whenever she's like at the gym setting up her camera, it's never something that I enjoy reading about, which maybe it's because it's a little too close to home, but I just feel like it's rarely done in a way that's intriguing, realistic, nuanced, detailed, just all of those things. So I gave it 3.5 stars. I think it was a great debut novel for sure. And then I read Annabelle Monaghan's new book. I used to say Monaghan, so that's gonna be an adjustment moment for me. Summer Romance, I think one of the best covers she's ever done. Her books in the past have been like 4.5 stars for me. I think I've read all of them, so I really love them. They're always about a woman who's 30-something, figuring out her life. You get to learn more about her, and then you get to see the romance, which I think is definitely something I've learned about my reading taste, is that I like it to be kind of literary fiction vibes because I really want to get to know the person before I get invested in whatever romance they happen upon. This one took me like a good 50 to 75 pages before really getting into it. In the beginning, you're seeing her go through some grief because her mom passed away 2 years ago and her husband is leaving her, and she has kids to take care of. She hasn't taken care of herself in a while, but when she's taking her dog to the dog park, her dog pees on the leg of a very attractive man, and it sparks a very cute romance. His name is Ethan. He is also related to her life in a way that she didn't realize, which makes things a little bit sticky, but he's a skateboarder. I feel like with all of her men in her books, they're very well-rounded, likable people in a way that's actually realistic for why you would fall for someone in the real world. He's super sweet. He just treats her so kindly, and he's really excited about her, and she is starting to feel more inspired to like put on a real outfit and just remember what she was like before she had kids and before her mom passed away. So it was a really wholesome book, and I feel like all of the locations that they were at were also very fun and summery, so I gave this 4.5 stars. I feel like I always give her books 4.5 stars, but they're so good. Like, I highly recommend them to anyone. She is one of my favorite authors for sure. And then I read Ashley Poston's new book, A Novel Love Story. One of my most anticipated reads of the year because I loved The 7 Years Slip so much last year. Her books always have a very fun magical realism aspect as well as a romance, and in this one, she accidentally gets transported into her favorite small town romance book series, which as a reader is one of the best things conceptually I've ever heard of. And in practice, it really just fell flat for me. It was so disappointing. The book becomes more about helping out the characters in the town of Ellerton, and it's about a bunch of characters that you don't personally know. They're very cartoony, larger than life, but I didn't feel attached to any of them, and she's supposed to be helping them, so I didn't really care. And then the romance is very jarring. They just go from not liking each other at all to him calling her nicknames and becoming overly familiar with her. It was just such a weird, jarring transition. I was like, where did the romance happen? Like, why do you even like him? I'm confused what happened in between all these pages. So this was a 3-star for me, which I could have never seen coming, but I will read every book that she ever publishes, so it's fine. And I finished off June with Happiness for Beginners by Catherine Center, one of my favorite authors. This book was so good. It's about a very intense camping trip in Wyoming, and I hate hiking, camping, all of those things, so I didn't expect to like this, but I love this book so much. I actually think about it a lot, so I feel like I need to change it to a 5-star. But you're following Helen. She's 32, she's newly divorced, and she's trying to find herself. So she wants to go on this camping trip because it's so intense that everyone claims to find themselves by the end of it. It's like impossible not to, because it's a life-threatening experience pretty much. It's like 3 weeks out in the woods. And in the beginning of the story, she's dropping off her dog at her brother's house, Duncan, and Duncan's best friend is there. His name is Jake. And Duncan, her brother, has always been irresponsible, not very smart, and since Jake is best friends with him, she just assumes that Jake is all of these qualities too. But it turns out Jake also signed up for the camping trip, and he has harbored a lifelong crush on her. And I have never seen it written in a book where a guy is so obsessed with a girl and he's just honest about it. He's like, I've had a crush on you since your wedding day. And now she's divorced. So there was a lot of romance in the beginning, and then the middle was very much like literary fiction, hiking trip, the drama of all of the people that you meet and the funny characters that you see there, and then the end wraps it up with romance again. But it was a page turner. Like, even the hiking trip was making my heart race reading it. 4.75, 4.90 stars. Can we do those ratings? Because this is like pretty much a 5-star in my brain, in my heart. Speaking of 5 stars, somewhere I have found a lot of my 5-star books is from Book of the Month. They are kindly sponsoring this video, as they have for a lot of them, because I am personally subscribed to them. They are a monthly subscription service where you can choose from a selection of books that they've had experts vet through. So the list will come out of like the romance pick, the thriller pick, the fantasy pick, etc. It's usually authors I've never heard of, because sometimes they'll choose like a debut author, but because they've had the experts go through and figure out which one they think is best, I've found so many books through them that I would have otherwise never picked up, and I find so many new books and authors this way. So for this month, I chose Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors. This is a literary fiction book that I've heard a lot of good reviews about, and they offer the best prices on hardcovers. So if you want to sign up, you can get your first book for $5 with code CARDIGAN, because we're getting into the fall time. I'll leave my link in the description. Thank you so much, Book of the Month. You guys are my favorites. Which is a perfect transition into July, because the first book I read was from Book of the Month, and that is Darling Girls by Sally Hepworth. This is a thriller book. I really haven't read that many thrillers this year. I don't know what was going on at the time. Oh, I was writing my book. That's what it was. Okay, I was very much in the depths of, I wrote like the largest chunk of my book during this month. I didn't post on my main channel for a month. So reading was a very sparse activity for me. I did it for maybe 15 minutes a night, if that. So this book took me like 2 weeks to read. And if that happens, I feel like it just kills any book for me. This one was about 3 sisters who grew up in the same foster home, and something comes out about some bones that were found in the backyard of the house that they grew up at, which reopens an investigation and a ton of childhood memories for them. So you're switching POVs of each of the sisters, and I really liked their bond and connection, and I liked their individual storylines. And you also get flashback scenes. I'm trying to remember what part of the story I didn't like. I feel like if I had read this faster, I probably would have liked it better because the reveal was really good, but it just didn't feel as fast as thrillers normally feel to me, which could have totally been because of the reading slump. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars. And then I did a reread of People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This was one of the first books I ever read, and I reread Beach Read last year, so I wanted to reread this one. I remember seeing in an interview that she said that she didn't plot out which places they would visit in this book, which I think is so crazy because it just feels so perfect. I forgot her descriptions of Alex and his like puppy dog face and how he's kind of awkward, and I just really like Alex as a character in this book. I feel like plot-wise, I actually don't love this book that much. I don't really like all of the different settings, which is kind of weird. I feel like I would, but character-wise, I really like Poppy and Alex. So if we were to like put them into the book lover setting or the beach read setting, top tier, but 5 stars because I am obsessed with Emily Henry's writing. She's perfect. And then I read 1 Star Romance by Laura Hankin, which I purely was interested in this book based off of the cover and the title, which is so cool. It's like having a really good thumbnail and title on a YouTube video or something. Like, didn't know anything about the author and wanted to read it based solely on that. Like, look at this cover. I think this is one of the prettiest covers that I've seen all year. How the book that he's holding is like what she's wearing. It's so cool. But basically, this is a literary fiction book. I thought it was a rom-com. It's not. It's written like a literary fiction. It is a literary fiction, but it's like kind of acting like a romance book, and it still has romance in there. It's just not a rom-com. We're following Natalie. She's an author. I love how it describes her as a messy artist and Rob as a rigid academic, because I love the academic types in books and I love the contrast between them. But he gives her book a 1-star review, but they have to walk down the aisle together because their best friends are getting married and they're in the wedding, and the wedding scene is so funny. It's also very much about friendship. It's about Natalie and her best friend and being in different life stages. Her friend is getting married and then having kids, and she's been single this whole time, living in New York City, just trying to figure out how to be an author. I was so jarred while reading this book though, because it just changes. It's just like a year and a half later. So jarring when you don't know that's gonna happen. Part 4, another year and a half later. So you're going through a lot of time with these characters, but I loved this book. I'm really enjoying literary fiction all of a sudden. I love the smart little quotes about life experiences that you've had but have never read before, but I like them to have the romance subplot, very important. And this one had to be sat on the couch for like a good 2.5 hours straight reading it. I gave this one 4.5 stars. So crazy. I'll definitely read whatever else she comes out with, but I think all of her previous work is more literary fiction focused. So, oh my gosh, this book is huge. I read Game of Thrones next by George R.R. Martin. I would have never picked up this book had I not done this video. It was chosen for me and it was such a grind to read this, and I am glad that I read it because it's such a phenomenon, but I'm probably not likely to continue the series. I did a very in-depth review in that video, so you can go watch it, but I gave it 4 stars and it was really good. Last chapter, last paragraph was my favorite. If there was more like fun fantasy aspects, would have definitely eaten it up, but it was historical fiction, real life, war, and I want more magical powers and fairies, personally. But it was still a good reading experience. I do feel cool that I read it now, so that's good. And then I read Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. This is a good old TikTok romance book. Like, this is where I found the recommendation. It was one of those classic indie published, I think, and then it became really popular, and then it got traditionally published, which I always think is such a cool arc to like kind of see authors go through. This book is also really slice of life, which I think I like. This is an accidental pregnancy trope, which is very rare, I feel like, for a book to blow up with that trope, but it is very sweet. Both of the characters have a limb difference, which the author talks about in her author's note. She has the same one that the main character has, and I think this book got so popular because the way that he treats her is just so sweet, so real life. I feel like I started reading the book and I was eating it up, and then the longer I read it, I wanted something more fast-paced to happen, which is just not the genre. And then the epilogue was very long and caught me off guard. I don't even think I really read it. So I gave it 3.5 stars. I think it's a really sweet book, but I lost interest halfway through. And lastly, August. We had a very interesting reading month. I started reading more books and I read a lot of different genres, starting with Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli. This is a fun fantasy romance enemies to lovers young adult book, which I feel like that genre is so like 2020, 21, and it's just a genre that I love so much, and I forget that I love it. It's kind of just comforting because I know that I like it. I know the tropes. This one has a lot of balls in it, and she gets to dress up. She acts like a socialite because she's actually a witch, and witches get killed in this world, and she starts falling for her biggest enemy. So it's a big cat and mouse game. It's a fast moving plot. It just had everything that I wanted it to have, and I'm very excited for the next book. So I gave this one 4 stars. And then I read The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. I think this is one of the most interesting books that I've read this year. This is a straight up literary fiction. This girl comes home from a drunk night out and she has a husband all of a sudden, and she did not have a husband before she went out, but he's there. He knows everything about her. She opens her phone. There's photos of them. There's wedding pictures. She doesn't understand what's going on. It's magical realism and it will never get explained to you in the book, but she discovers that if she makes the husband go to the attic to get something, there's a weird flash and a buzz, and then a different husband will come down the attic. So you just kind of follow her as she gets a ton of different husbands. You get to read about a lot of different personality types, a lot of different types of guys, and it's really funny and silly, but it goes through the husbands so fast, and there's never really an emotional pull to any of them, which I was really craving the entire time. I don't even know how she sustained writing a book this big when almost like every paragraph, new husband, new husband, new husband, and there just was no relief in it. It was a very fun read, but I feel like it could have gotten so much deeper with, you know, choosing a partner is choosing a life. And because there was not really a huge gradient of her experiences, like there was kind of, but she didn't really dive into that. I feel like the whole thing could have been a metaphor for how you should be maybe content with the person that you have, because swapping him out and trying 200 other different people won't give you like more happiness or something that you think you're looking for. But it doesn't really have any sort of messaging like that. So I gave it 3.5, but a million points for concept. That is the coolest thing I've ever heard of. The next 2 I read on my Kindle. I read The Vows by Jessica Joyce, which is a rom-com. With both of her books, I start the book, love it so much. I think the writing is flowing really well, and then for whatever reason, 50% mark, don't care at all anymore. Want it to be over so bad. Started listening to the audiobook, fell asleep during the audiobook, woke up kind of confused, trying to finish the book. Something cute happened at the end, but then I was like kind of asleep for like the Easter eggs of it, so it didn't really hit as hard. So half my fault, half I just don't jive with the author like I thought I did. So I gave that one 3 stars, and then I read a non-fiction book. I think this is the only one I've read this year. What I Talk About When I Talk About Running by Murakami. I haven't read any of his other books, and he's a very famous author, and most of the reviews for this one are like, only read this if you're a mega fan, because it's just basically his journals about him running and also like writing novels sometimes. It was a little random, I guess, to read. Like it literally is just his journals. I thought he was gonna compare running and writing novels in like a really profound, fun way, and it wasn't really that way, but I also was just into running, so I wanted to read a fun little palette cleanser in between all my fiction books, and it did that. I read it really quickly, and I was really interested the whole time as I read it, so if that sounds interesting, I would say go for it, but I gave it 3 stars. There's nothing that like sticks in my brain that was really stand out about it. And then I read The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. I was so excited for this. She writes great literary fiction books, and this one was compared to Narnia, so I had very high expectations. One of the reasons this book didn't hit One of the reasons this book didn't hit is because I was expecting to be transported to this magical Narnia world as it is marketed. And then that does happen at some point in the book. And the language used from the queen is like Gen Z, kind of like brash humor. And I was so jarred. I was like, that is not... I just got pulled back to reality unwillingly. I wanted to escape into this fantasy land. And those words, that language is making me not escape. I just didn't like any of like the tasks that they had to achieve in the world. I feel like it could have been so fun and I just didn't like it. So I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was finally time to read another Fari McFarlane book. So I picked up Between Us because I'd already had this on my shelf. And this one is so good. I think I also mispronounced the main character's name of this book in a video. I was saying Roisin and I think it's Roy Shin. But this follows another friend group. They go away to a fun little trip and she's been dating a dude named Joe for like a decade. And he is a famous screenwriter now because his shows have been popping off and he has a new one coming out. So as a friend group at this house, they all sit down to watch it together. Our main girl notices that one of the things that happens in the show is a family secret, a traumatizing one at that she confided in Joe with, and now it's on the TV screen in front of her, as well as a main character who does a lot of cheating in this TV show. So she's like, if this one thing that you put in it was true, how much of the other stuff was true? This book had my heart racing. It's a crazy mystery type of of thing happening inside the relationship with his TV show, and it also explores what a toxic relationship looks like. So as she's going through it, you as the reader are too, and you're going through the same emotions as her in the book, which I think is such a talent to be able to do that as an author. I hope to one day be able to do that. She is just so skilled at it. And then the friend group is kind of falling apart. People are leaving the group chat. Some of the funniest things I've ever seen was happening in this book, and it was just actually hilarious and tragic. And then there's a subplot of romance that kind of blooms unexpectedly. This book was so good. 5 stars again. This is when it solidified. New favorite author. And then I read Reckless by Lauren Roberts, which is the second book in her trilogy. This is a fantasy romance book as well, enemies to lovers, which, like I was saying, it's just like a comfort genre and trope. It's just such a good time. I need more of these for the fall time. I loved the first book. I loved the novella after the first book. And then this one I had seen mixed reviews for, so I was kind of nervous going into it because you're getting a lot of interactions between Kai and Peyton and less like plot things happening. I genuinely loved just spending time with them. There's so much dialogue that you can just like read it. So it was just a fast, fun time, which I feel like if I'm picking up a book of this genre, that is what I'm looking for. And the ending was insane. I'm so excited for the next book, and I don't think we have to wait too long. It comes out early next year, so I'm so excited for that. And then I read another Vari McFarlane book, because at this point I was realizing when I read her books, I have a guaranteed fun time, so I need to read her entire backlog. So this one is called Mad About You. This one sounds like the plot of Funny Story because her boyfriend proposes to her unexpectedly, and that just ends in flames. So she needs to go find a new roommate, a new place to stay. So she moves in with this guy, and then she realizes that he was at a wedding that she was supposed to photograph, and he left the wedding suddenly. He was the one who was supposed to be getting married. So it's like these two ex-fiancés living in a house together, seemingly nothing in common. If anything, it's awkward because she was supposed to be the wedding photographer of his wedding, and how can he be a good guy if he just like walked out? And it's just so good. It's so good every time. I want to reread it already. I read it like 2 weeks ago. I want to read every Vari McFarlane book ever, and I probably will. 5 stars. And lastly, I read The Night and Gale by Kristen Hanna, a very popular book. My first Kristen Hanna book, which I understand why she's so popular now. She writes historical fictions, which is definitely a genre that I hear about and then run the opposite way. But this was amazing. It follows 2 sisters while France is being occupied by the Germans during World War II. I think it's one of my first World War II books actually as well. You fall in love with the sisters so much. They're complete opposites at the beginning of the book. The younger one is super dead set on joining the resistance and standing up against what's going on, and the older sister is like, I am a mother, I want to just take care of my kids, my husband is at war, let's just follow the rules, let's keep our heads down. And it was a thick book, but it flew by, and I have never cried so hard at a book so many times, ever. I think I cried, like hard cried, like 5 different times, and it's because it's based on a real life event, and that is just the craziest part about the book. So it was 5 stars for me. I cannot wait for the movie. They chose the Fanning sisters, I think, which I only know them from like the Breaking Dawn movie, so I don't know if it's gonna be a good casting or not, but I'm so excited for the movie. I read this before my trip to Paris, and that will be a video coming out on my main channel on September 28th. One of the most exciting videos on my channel this year, so I'm really excited for that one. But that concludes everything that I read this summer. In conclusion, literary fiction with romance subplots are my favorite genre. And sign up for Book of the Month with code CARDIGAN, $5 on your first hardcover. I love you guys. I'll see you somewhere else on the internet. Bye.